Settle in, get comfortable, turn the lights down low if you want. This one is going to take a while, and that is entirely the point. Steven Universe is the kind of show that rewards patience. It rewards sitting still. It was built by someone, Rebecca Sugar, who understood that the best stories are the ones that take their time, that plant something small in a corner of the frame and let it grow quietly for 2 seasons before anyone notices it was ever there at all. This script is made in that same spirit. There is no rush here, no deadline, just the lore, all of it, laid out slowly and carefully the way it deserves to be. We are going to start at the very beginning, not Steven's beginning. Not even Rose Quartz's beginning. We are going all the way back to the foundation of the gem civilization itself, to the first kindergartens, to the origin of the Diamond Authority, to the ancient system that set every single event in the show in motion, long before any of the characters we love were ever formed. And from there, we are going to move through everything. Pink Diamond's life in full. The Gem War and what it truly cost. The crystal gems and their private histories. Steven's nature and what it means to be half of something ancient. The songs. The humans. The loose threads that the show left gently open. By the time we are done, you will know this world the way you know a place you have visited many times. The kind of knowing that lives in the body. The kind that surfaces quietly when you close your eyes. So, here we go. Section 1. The world before Steven. The gem civilization and the machine that built it. Picture a universe that has been running for a very long time. Longer than any civilization on Earth has existed. Longer than human memory reaches. A universe where, somewhere out in the dark between galaxies, a single planet became the seat of an empire that would eventually spread across thousands of worlds, stripping them bare in order to keep itself growing. That planet is Homeworld. Homeworld is not in our galaxy. Garnet confirms this in the episode called Log Date 7152, mentioning offhand that Homeworld exists in a separate galaxy that is still visible from Earth, a detail so casually delivered that it is easy to miss, but it matters. It means that the Gem civilization reached across intergalactic distances to get here. Their ships crossed the void between galaxies. Their warp pad network connected star systems separated by millions of light years. The scale of what the Diamonds built is genuinely difficult to hold in the mind all at once. And Homeworld itself, at the time of the show, is a ruin. Not dramatically. Not visibly, if you are looking at the upper levels. But down in the basement of the planet, in the places no one uses anymore, the rock is dead. The ground has been stripped of everything that made it generative. The planet ate itself to keep the empire going. The very surface Homeworld gems walk on is the hollowed-out remains of a world that was drained centuries or millennia ago and then built over, layered with structures and technology and the architecture of power, while the dead ground beneath it all went ignored. This happened because of the kindergartens. The kindergarten system is one of the most quietly horrifying things in the show, and the show is very aware of this, which is why it gives us time to understand how it works before it starts letting characters reckon with what it means. The word itself is borrowed from German, where it literally means children's garden, a place where children grow. In the gem civilization, it is exactly that. A garden where new gems are grown. The name is almost gentle, which is part of what makes it so unsettling when you think about what it actually involves. Here is how it works. The Diamonds identify a planet with the right kind of mineral composition. Rich, dense rock, full of whatever organic and inorganic material is needed to produce the type of gem they want to grow. Teams of gems arrive on the planet and survey it, selecting the best sites. Then the injectors arrive. The injectors look, if you can picture this, somewhat like enormous bacteriophage viruses, the kind that exist in the real world, and attach themselves to cells and inject their genetic material. They have legs that anchor them to the rock and a needle that drives down into the earth and injects gem essence, a concentrated liquid derived from diamond power, into the ground. That essence is what feeds the growth. A gem begins to form in the space created by the injection, drawing nutrients from the surrounding rock the way a seed draws water and minerals from soil. Slowly, over months or years, a gem crystallizes. Its type is determined by a combination of the minerals in the rock and the specific diamond essence used. Its personality, its abilities, its place in the hierarchy, all of it is encoded in the nature of its formation. When it is ready, it breaks free from the rock face and emerges, leaving behind a hole that is shaped exactly like it was. Those holes, person-shaped spaces carved into the walls of quarries and canyons and cliff faces, are one of the show's most immediately striking images. They look like the outlines of people who simply stepped backward into the stone and were swallowed by it. Amethyst's exit hole is there in the prime kindergarten on Earth. She knows its number, Facet 5, Cut 8XM. She can find it in the rock and slide herself back into it. It fits her exactly. That is simultaneously beautiful and terrible, and the show knows it. The problem with kindergartens, the thing that makes the whole system a form of slow planetary destruction, is what the injection process does to the surrounding environment. The injectors do not create nutrients. They extract them. Every gem that grows in a kindergarten does so by pulling the life force out of the rock around it. The minerals, the organic compounds, the water table, the subsurface chemistry that supports plant life, all of it gets slowly converted into gem material. And once it is converted, it is gone. The rock around a kindergarten is dead. Not dead in the way that desert rock is dead. That kind of rock can still support life with the right rainfall. Kindergarten rock is dead in a permanent way, a way that has never been reversed. Peridot confirms this in a matter-of-fact tone that makes it land harder than a dramatic declaration would. The Earth's kindergartens have been inactive for 5,000 years, and the area around them still cannot sustain plant growth. The ground remembers. If a full colony was completed, if all 89 planned kindergartens had been established on Earth, along with the 67 spires and all the galaxy warp stations and the infrastructure the Diamonds had planned, Earth would have been hollowed down to its core. The planet would have been left as a husk, its crust partially removed, its interior scraped clean, its surface reshaped into a gem settlement no longer capable of supporting the organic life it once held. The plan was enormous. Only 5% of it was ever completed before the rebellion stopped it. 5%, and it still left permanent scars in the rock of North America that thousands of years have not healed. The Empire had done this to 43 planetary bodies and 2 star systems by the time the moon base on Earth was completed. That number is mentioned almost in passing in the show's timeline. 43 worlds, 2 entire star systems. Each of them processed through the same system, drained of what made them alive, and then abandoned as gem settlements or left as husks, depending on how useful they remained after colonization. This is the civilization that Pink Diamond was born into. This is the civilization that considered Earth just another entry in a very long list. Something worth considering, something the show touches on without fully developing, is what it would have felt like to be a gem who loved the system, who believed in it, who looked at the structure of the Empire and saw not a cage but a design, a rational, elegant arrangement of roles and functions that kept an enormous civilization running across thousands of star systems. Jasper believed in it. Most of the homeworld gems who appear in the show, before they meet Steven, believe in it to varying degrees, because from inside the system works. There is food, or the equivalent gems do not eat, but they have energy, and homeworld provides it. There is purpose. There is a hierarchy that tells you where you stand, which is frightening if you are at the bottom, but is at least a kind of certainty. And there is something to belong to an empire, a cause, a diamond whose authority you serve and whose power gives meaning to whatever you are doing. The show is not interested in pretending that totalitarianism works well, but it is interested in being honest about why people who grew up inside a system tend to defend it, even when the system is harming them, even when what they are defending is their own imprisonment. Garnet, when she first forms and realizes what she is afraid, not just of punishment, though that is real. Blue Diamond sentences Ruby to be shattered on the spot. She is afraid because she has been formed in a world that told her what she is should not exist, and she is now existing, and the framework she has for understanding herself does not include this possibility. It takes Rose Quartz, standing outside the system and looking in, to tell her that she is not a mistake. This is what the rebellion offered, at its deepest level. Not just freedom from Homeworld's authority, a different framework for understanding what a gem could be, and the tragedy of the corrupting light and the 1,000 years of war and everything else is that the framework change that should have happened on a civilizational scale was instead contained to a small group of gems on a single planet, while the rest of the empire kept going as it always had. Now, You cannot understand the gem empire without understanding its caste system, because the caste system is the engine that makes everything else move. Every gem in the empire has a type, and every type has a place, and the place determines everything. Not just your job, your name, your living situation, who you are allowed to interact with, whether you are allowed to have opinions, whether anyone is required to treat you as though your preferences matter at all. Rubies are soldiers. They are small, they are red, and they come in enormous numbers, because quantity is their purpose. Individual rubies are considered interchangeable, which is a philosophy the show illustrates with uncomfortable clarity when we meet the team of ruby soldiers assigned to Sapphire as bodyguards. They do not have individual names among homeworld gems. They are tracked by number codes. There are, as one of them puts it, tons of me, meaning that the loss of a single ruby is not considered a meaningful loss, because there are always more where that one came from. Sapphires are aristocrats and advisors. They have future vision, the ability to see probable outcomes of events before they occur. This makes them valuable, which means they are treated well, which means they occupy a high position in the hierarchy. Sapphire, the one we meet and eventually come to know as one half of Garnet, is a member of Blue Diamond's court. She is attended to, she is listened to, she has status. She has exactly one eye, wide and pale blue, and a gift that the show eventually complicates beautifully by showing how much burden comes with knowing what is going to happen before it does. Paradots are technicians and engineers. They manage kindergartens, maintain equipment, analyze data. They are the technical class of the Empire. Era 2 Paradots, the ones born after Homeworld began running low on resources, have no natural weapons of their own. They rely on limb enhancers, mechanical extensions that give them additional capabilities. Our Peridot arrives on Earth with these enhancers and spends much of her arc adjusting to life without them, discovering along the way that she is more than what the Empire defined her as. Pearls are attendants, status symbols. They are created to be beautiful and compliant, to carry things and announce arrivals and perform whatever tasks their owners require. They are not designed to fight, not designed to think independently, not designed to have preferences. Peridot describes them as accessories, something you put on display. On Homeworld, a pearl is a marker of status. Only high-ranking gems are permitted to own one. They exist, by Homeworld's logic, for someone else's use, and that is the entire extent of what they are supposed to be. The pearl, we know the one who trained herself to fight with a spear, who built elaborate holograms and ran tactical analyses and kept the Crystal Temple systems running for thousands of years, is what happens when a pearl is given permission to be something other than what she was made to be. And she was given that permission by the one diamond who understood, eventually, that the permission itself was the most revolutionary thing she could offer. And then there are the bismuths. Enormous, powerful, built for construction. Their bodies can reshape metal. Their natural function in Homeworld society is to build the infrastructure of the Empire, the spires where philosophers think, the arenas where gems train and compete, the temples where the elite live. They are workers. Strong ones, valued ones, but workers. The show gives us one bismuth in particular, and she is one of the most fully realized characters in the entire run, a gem who built things for an empire, and eventually asked why the things she built were never built for people like her. This is the world. This is the machine that was running for thousands of years before the show begins. An empire with a strict hierarchy, a colonization system that destroyed planets to fuel itself, and at the top of it all, 4 beings of immense power who had been running the entire operation since before living memory, the Diamonds. And the Diamonds, as we eventually learn, are not just the rulers of the empire, they are, in some sense, the engine of it. Every kindergarten runs on diamond essence. The specific type of diamond essence used in the injection process determines what kind of gems emerge. The diamonds are not just governing the empire. They are, in a very literal biological sense, producing it. Every gem in the civilization is, at some remove, a product of diamond power. The implications of this are enormous, and the show only gestures at them, which we will come back to when we talk about white diamonds specifically. For now, understand this. The Gem Empire was a machine for growth, and it had been running for a very long time before 4 beings named Yellow, Blue, Pink, and White decided that Earth was going to be next. Before we go any further into the deep lore, drop a comment telling me where you are in the world right now and what time it is. Whether you are listening to this from your bed at 2 in the morning, or on a commute, or lying on the floor of your living room, I want to know. And if you have not subscribed yet, the button is right there. This channel is going to be here for a long time, and so is the lore. Section 2. The Diamond Authority, 4 rulers, and the weight of what they were. They appear in the show's early seasons as murals. Stone carvings in ancient structures, representations in faded gem-colored light on the walls of the moon base. 4 figures, each in a different color, arranged in a diamond formation. White at the top, yellow to one side, blue to another, and pink at the bottom. Their sizes in the murals tell you their relative power and status. White is enormous. Pink, at the bottom, is the smallest. Yellow diamond, blue diamond, pink diamond, and white diamond. The Great Diamond Authority. The 4 rulers of the Gem Empire, the 4 beings around whom everything else organized itself, they are not what you expect rulers to be. That is one of the things the show does quietly and then very loudly as the seasons progress. The expectation at the start is that they are villains in the traditional sense. Powerful beings exercising power for the sake of it, indifferent to the suffering they cause. And that is true, in part. They do cause suffering. Enormous amounts of it. But the picture that fills in over 5 seasons is more complicated than simple villainy, and the complication is part of what makes the show worth watching. Yellow Diamond is the military and administrative heart of the Empire. She runs the fleets, manages the courts, oversees the colonization operations. She is efficient in the way that people are efficient when they have decided that efficiency is the most important value, when they have decided that getting things done is a higher priority than examining whether the things being done are worth doing. Her voice actress, Patti LuPone, gives her a cadence that is almost bored with its own authority, the sound of someone who has been making impossible decisions for so long that the impossibility of them no longer registers. Yellow's emotional architecture is one of the show's slower revelations. When we first meet her, she seems cold, impatient, contemptuous of sentimentality. She snaps at Blue Diamond for still mourning Pink thousands of years after Pink's apparent death. She wants the crystal gems captured or destroyed, and she wants it done efficiently. But then the show gives you the episode called What's the Use of Feeling Blue? And everything shifts. Yellow Diamond, in that episode, is trying to convince Blue Diamond to stop grieving and come back to work. The song she sings is brisk and practical, a list of reasons why feeling is useless. And the entire time she is singing it, she is visibly grieving herself. The song is not cold. It is the sound of someone who has decided that the only way to survive grief is to run fast enough that it cannot catch you. Yellow Diamond was devastated by the loss of Pink. She just expressed it by working harder. That detail does not excuse what she did. It does not excuse 5,000 years of colonization and destruction, or the cluster, or the corrupting light. But it makes her real. It makes her a person who made catastrophically bad choices in response to pain, which is one of the show's recurring themes about how harm propagates through the world. Blue Diamond is grief made into a physical presence. She moves slowly. Her voice, voiced by Lisa Hannigan, is low and heavy. The sound of someone who has been carrying something for a very long time and has reorganized her entire life around carrying it. After Pink's apparent death, Blue Diamond built a human zoo, a preserved habitat on a moon, where humans taken from Earth lived in complete comfort, cared for, healthy, unaware that they were in an exhibit, unaware that their ancestors had been taken from their planet 6,000 years ago. She built it because Pink loved humans. It was grief expressed as preservation. It was, in its way, an act of love. It was also a profound violation of the humans inside it, and the show holds both of those truths at the same time without deciding which one wins. Blue's power is empathy in its most overwhelming form. Her emotional state bleeds into the gems around her, flooding them with whatever she is feeling. When she is sad, everyone near her begins to cry. It is not subtle. It is not controlled. It is the emotional equivalent of an open wound, her grief leaking constantly into the room, saturating anyone who gets close enough. Steven is the first being who seems genuinely able to sit with her in that grief without being flattened by it, which is part of why she eventually begins to trust him. And then there is White Diamond. White Diamond is the most difficult character in the show to write about, because so much of what makes her interesting is what the show deliberately does not tell you. She does not appear in full until the season 5 finale, despite the show running for 5 seasons and a film. For most of its run, she is an absence, a presence in murals, a figure that other gems reference with a particular quality of caution that sits somewhere between reverence and fear. Yellow and Blue Diamond, who are themselves terrifying presences for most of the show, speak about White with the careful tone of gems who know exactly what she is capable of and have decided not to find out. When she does appear, she is visually unlike any other character in the series. White is monochrome in a show that uses color as one of its primary storytelling tools. She is drawn with a slightly different aesthetic from other gems, her face more realistically proportioned, more expressive, more human in certain ways that register as uncanny rather than comforting. Her ship, which contains her body she has not left Homeworld in an unspecified but very long time, is itself shaped like her. She lives inside herself, essentially. A shut-in at the center of an empire, sealed away from the universe she built. Her power is the most extreme in the show. She can project her consciousness into another gem and take over their body, speaking through them, moving through them, filling them with her mind until they become extensions of her will. She calls this removing their flaws. She genuinely believes that when she does this, she is perfecting the gems she inhabits, replacing their impure, flawed individual identities with her pure, perfect self. This is not presented as metaphor. It is presented as the literal worldview of a being who has been at the top of an absolute power structure for so long that she has completely lost the ability to conceive of herself as anything other than the correct answer to every question. The line she says about Pink Diamond in the season 5 finale, that Pink is a part of her, a part she always has to repress, is the most revealing thing she says in the entire show. Because the most plausible reading of that line, supported by the show's visual logic, is that the other diamonds were in some way created from or by White Diamond herself. White light contains the full visible spectrum. Yellow, blue, and pink are each a portion of that spectrum. There is a color theory reading of the Diamond Authority that suggests the 3 younger diamonds are literally aspects of White, fragmented off or created from her in the same way that splitting white light through a prism produces individual colors. The show never confirms this. It gestures at it and then moves on. White says the line and the confrontation continues, and the question of where the diamonds actually came from remains open. What we know is that White embodies a pathology of perfectionism so complete and so long-standing that she has essentially become her own prison, shut away in her ship, not leaving, controlling everything she can reach from a distance, unable to tolerate the existence of imperfection in a universe that is entirely composed of it. Steven breaks through to her by laughing at her. The show earns this moment over multiple seasons. When you have been operating as an absolute ruler for long enough that the concept of being laughed at has ceased to be imaginable, the actual experience of it is disorienting in a way that nothing else can be. White Diamond blushes. She turns pink. Color returns to something that had been drained of it, which is visually one of the most striking moments in the entire series, and the show plays it quietly enough that you almost miss what just happened. By the time of the follow-up series Steven Universe Future, White Diamond has done something remarkable. She has turned her possession power inside out. Instead of inhabiting other gems and removing their flaws, she allows other gems to inhabit her, to enter her body temporarily as a form of therapeutic self-discovery. She uses the most harmful thing she ever did as a tool for healing. The show presents this as genuine progress, because it is. Whether it is enough to account for what came before is a question the show does not answer, because that is not the kind of question the show believes has clean answers. Yellow Diamond, by the end, is dismantling the colonization program and working on something that resembles reparations, though the show does not use that word. Blue Diamond is trying to learn what it means to engage with gems as people rather than as subjects. All 3 of them are, in their imperfect and frequently awkward ways, trying to become something different from what they were. The show believes in this. It insists on it, the way it insists on most things, gently, persistently, without letting anyone off the hook for what they did, but also without deciding that what they did defines what they will always be. That insistence is one of the things that make the diamonds interesting. Not because they deserve sympathy, they caused incalculable harm, and the show never pretends otherwise, but because the show is interested in the question of whether harm is a permanent sentence, whether the beings who caused it can genuinely change, whether the answer to the question of what to do with power that has been catastrophically misused is destruction or transformation. Steven's answer is always transformation. The show is honest about the cost of that answer, but it never stops believing in it. Section 3. Pink Diamond, a life built in layers. The most important thing to understand about Pink Diamond is that she was very young. Not young in the way a human child is young in diamond terms, which is a different scale entirely, but young in the ways that matter, young in her understanding of consequences, young in her capacity to think past what she wanted right now, young in her ability to understand the difference between a grand gesture and genuine change. She was given Spinel to keep her company, and she played with Spinel in a garden for what the show implies was a considerable span of time. She was given her own pearl, and she and Pink Pearl played together in secret in ways that went against the dignity expected of a diamond, making faces and goofing off in places where the other diamonds would not see them. She threw tantrums, she cracked walls. She accidentally damaged Pink Pearl's eye during one of these tantrums, a piece of lore the show reveals late and quietly, placing the damage not in White Diamond's cruelty but in Pink's own uncontrolled outbursts. She asked for things and was told no, repeatedly, and responded the way someone responds who has never been genuinely denied anything important and suddenly discovers that the word no exists. She wanted a colony. She asked for one and was told she was too young, too inexperienced. She asked again and again. She asked Yellow Diamond and was dismissed. She asked White Diamond directly and was rejected with enough force that it sent her into a rage. She waited. She kept asking. Eventually, after what the show implies was a very long time, she was given Earth. It was not exactly what she wanted by the time she got it. She had been asking for so long that the asking had become its own thing, its own part of her identity. She wanted to be taken seriously. She wanted to be a real diamond, doing what diamonds did, running a colony. And when she finally had the opportunity to do exactly that, she discovered that actually doing it was nothing like what she had imagined. Pink Diamond descended to Earth. She looked at the kindergarten operations beginning to process the planet's crust. She flew over the continents. She encountered humans not close up, not yet, but she saw their civilizations from above, their settlements and their fires and their elaborate attempts to make sense of the world they lived in. She encountered the organic life that filled every corner of the planet, the enormous variety of it, the way it moved and grew and reproduced and died and filled the air with sound. She encountered things that the Gem civilization had no category for, because the Gem civilization had spent its entire existence destroying things like this rather than observing them. And something shifted. Pearl had suggested, at some point early in the colony's establishment, that Pink might enjoy seeing the newly formed amethysts in the prime kindergarten. To do this without Yellow and Blue finding out, since they had made clear that visiting the kindergarten personally would be beneath a diamond's dignity, Pearl suggested Pink disguise herself. Shapeshift into the form of a rose quartz soldier, one of the new gem types Pink had designed specifically for this colony, and blend in among the troops. Pink did this, and in that moment of putting on a different form, something cracked open in her. As rose quartz, she was not a diamond. She was a soldier, a person of no particular status. No one was paying court to her. No one was waiting on her. No one was looking at her with the complicated mixture of fear and deference that every gem in her actual life directed at her. She was just a gem, in a body, on a planet that was alive in every direction she looked. She fell in love with Earth. She fell in love with the fact of it, the overwhelming aliveness of it, the way organic life covered every surface and filled every ecological niche and kept going, kept insisting on its own continuation. She began to understand, in a way that had not been available to her from above, that the colony operation was not neutral, that every injector was ending something, that the plan she had asked for with such persistence was a plan to drain this particular version of aliveness out of existence. She tried to stop it. She went to the other diamonds, without the disguise, as Pink Diamond, and told them she did not want to complete the colony. She had changed her mind. She wanted to preserve Earth instead. They said no. Yellow told her to finish what she started. Blue tried to help by creating the human zoo, a way for Pink to keep the humans she had become attached to without halting the colonization that Homeworld required. It was meant as a compromise. It landed as evidence that they had completely missed the point of what Pink was saying, which was not "I want to keep some of them," but "I want all of it, all of the organic life, all of the living systems. I want the whole thing to continue." The no from the diamonds was the beginning of the rebellion. Pink Diamond, still in her rose quartz disguise, began to recruit. She approached gems who were unhappy with Homeworld's system. She found Bismuth, a construction gem with enormous talent and even more enormous frustration at what she was being asked to build and for whom. She found gems who were drawn to the promise that on Earth, a gem could be more than what the kindergarten specified. She found, in the cloud arena above Earth's atmosphere, a ruby who had just accidentally fused with a sapphire and created something the Gem Empire had never seen, and she told them that they were the answer to their own questions, and that they were welcome on Earth. She kept the disguise going. Pearl knew the truth. Pearl, who had been given to Pink by the diamonds and who had developed a connection with her that the caste system had no language for, the closest thing Pink Diamond had to a genuine equal. Pearl was the only one who knew. And the secret of who Rose Quartz really was became the foundation of a rebellion that lasted 1,000 years. Understand what that means. For 1,000 years, the crystal gems fought for a leader who was not who she said she was. Bismuth built weapons for Rose Quartz, not knowing that Rose Quartz was the diamond who had presided over the colonization they were all fighting against. Garnet became part of the rebellion because Rose Quartz accepted her existence as a cross-gem fusion, not knowing that Rose Quartz was herself a disguise. That the being who told her she was the answer was a diamond playing at being someone else. Every crystal gem who followed Rose, every gem who fought and was wounded and eventually corrupted while fighting for the rebellion, they were following a fiction. A true fiction. A fiction that had become real through use. A fiction that had grown into something genuine over the course of 1,000 years of living it. But a fiction nonetheless. The rebellion could not end with a victory. The diamonds would not leave Earth as long as Pink Diamond existed, and a crystal gem rebellion was fighting in her name. The war was a stalemate. It had been a stalemate for hundreds of years by the time Bismuth presented Rose with the breaking point, and Rose refused it and sealed Bismuth away rather than confront the philosophical disagreement directly. The war kept going. Blue Diamond arrived at the Cloud Arena to speak to Pink directly, in her Pink Diamond identity, while the battle below continued. She lectured Pink. She told her to simply appear unfazed by the rebels, to project strength, to smile and wave. She told Pink that as long as Pink Diamond existed, the rebellion would continue to have a figurehead to fight for, a reason to believe they could win. Blue Diamond said this kindly. She said it with the intention of helping. She had no idea she was handing Pink the solution she had been looking for. Pink Diamond went back to Pearl, and together they constructed the plan. Pink would swallow compressed gem material, ground up fragments that would resemble Pink Diamond's shattered remains. Pearl would shapeshift into the form of Rose Quartz. In front of witnesses, including Eyeball, a ruby soldier who would carry this testimony back to Homeworld, and Jasper, a quartz born in the Beta Kindergarten whose entire loyalty was to Pink Diamond, Pearl would poof Pink with Rose's sword, which could shatter a gem's physical form without damaging their actual gem. The fake shards would fall. Witnesses would see Rose Quartz standing over them. The conclusion would be inescapable. Pink Diamond, the diamond of Earth, had been shattered by a rebel. Before they went through with it, Pink gave Pearl one final command. Her diamond's voice, her authority as a diamond, an order that Pearl's very construction would be unable to disobey. Never speak of this. Never tell anyone what really happened. Never reveal the truth. And Pearl, who loved Pink and then loved Rose and spent 5,000 years carrying a truth she was physically incapable of saying, said yes. What came after the faked shattering was not the peace Pink had been hoping for. The diamonds did not simply leave. They grieved. Their grief became rage. Their rage became a weapon. 3 diamonds looked at the sky above Earth and screamed, and the scream was also a light, and the light corrupted every gem on the planet's surface who was not protected by Rose's shield in that moment. Rose protected Pearl. Rose protected Garnet. She could not protect everyone. She could not protect hundreds of crystal gems who had fought for her. She could not protect Homeworld gems who had not evacuated in time. She could not protect Lapis Lazuli, a gem who had come to Earth during the colonization period and gotten swept up in the rebellion by accident, been poofed by bismuth, been imprisoned in a mirror by homeworld soldiers who mistook her for a crystal gem, and then been dropped and cracked and left behind in the chaos of the evacuation. The corrupting light changed everything it touched. And what was left, when the light faded and the diamonds retreated, and the war became something the history books on Homeworld would record as concluded, was a planet with 2 surviving crystal gems, hundreds of corrupted monsters who had once been people, a cracked gem in a mirror at the galaxy warp, and a woman named Rose Quartz who was going to have to figure out how to live with all of it. She spent the next 5,000 years doing exactly that. And eventually, several hundred years before the show begins, she met a human musician named Greg Universe. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before we get to Greg, we need to talk about the Gem War in more detail. Specifically, we need to talk about bismuth and what the war cost when the people fighting it could not use every weapon available to them. Section 4. The Gem War, what it meant to fight without certain weapons. There is an argument, a real and uncomfortable one, buried inside the 100-episode special that introduces bismuth. It is the kind of argument the show raises precisely because it does not have a clean answer, and it would be doing the show a disservice to pretend otherwise. Bismuth is one of the original crystal gems. She was there at the beginning of the rebellion, among the first gems to follow Rose Quartz's call. She is a construction gem. Her arms can reshape themselves into any tool, any form, any implement she needs. She built the weapons the crystal gems used in the war. She built the forge where those weapons were made. She built Rose's sword specifically at Rose's request, designed with a very particular limitation. It can disrupt a gem's physical form and force them to retreat into their gemstone, but it cannot shatter them. Rose requested this specifically. She did not want a weapon that could permanently end a gem. Bismuth understood this and accepted it for a while. She built the sword and gave it to Rose and kept building other weapons and kept fighting for hundreds of years. Watching crystal gems get bubbled and corrupted and lost. Watching homeworld gems shatter crystal gems without hesitation. Watching the war grind on without end in sight. Because poof a homeworld gem and they come back. Destabilize them and they regenerate. You could win 1,000 individual battles and still be no closer to winning the war. So she built something else. The breaking point. A weapon designed specifically to shatter gems, to end them permanently. She brought it to Rose and made her argument. The diamonds could not be poofed. They were too powerful for that. But with the breaking point, the crystal gems could, in principle, threaten permanent consequences for the diamonds, could, conceivably, end the war in a way that winning 1,000 skirmishes never would. Rose refused. Her argument was ethical. You do not shatter a gem, not any gem. Regardless of what they have done, the sanctity of a gem's existence is not conditional on their behavior. We are better than Homeworld. We do not do that. And then Rose poofed bismuth and sealed her in a bubble and hid her in Lion's dimension and told the other crystal gems she had gone missing in the Battle of the Ziggurat. Here is where it becomes genuinely complicated. Because Rose's position is the morally cleaner one on its face. Non-violence as an absolute value. Refusing to become what you are fighting against. These are real ethical positions with real philosophical foundations. But the show, if you watch it carefully, is not letting Rose's position stand unopposed. It is doing something more honest than that. Rose sealed bismuth away because bismuth pushed back. Because the disagreement was genuine and the argument was difficult and Rose did not want to have it, she chose to disappear the person raising uncomfortable questions rather than engage with those questions and either change her mind or make her counter-argument clearly. This is not how someone who is confident in their position behaves. This is how someone behaves when they know, at some level, that the other person has a point they cannot fully answer. And then look at what Rose actually did during the war. The faked shattering. The command to Pearl to never speak of it. This required Pearl to perform a lie. It required Pearl to carry a secret she was incapable of setting down. It caused Pearl ongoing psychological damage across thousands of years. Rose drew a strict line at shattering Gems' physical existence. She did not draw a comparable line at causing lasting psychological harm to her most loyal companion. Then there is the corrupting light. The Diamonds launched it because the war had gone on long enough that their grief and rage overwhelmed their judgment. Would they have been willing to do that if the breaking point had been a credible threat to them? If Rose had demonstrated, early in the rebellion, that the crystal gems could permanently end even a diamond, the war might have ended differently. The corrupting light might never have happened. Hundreds of crystal gems might have remained themselves instead of spending 5,000 years as confused, suffering monsters. The show does not ask this question directly. It cannot. Quite to ask it too loudly would be to undermine the central message of the finale, which is that reconciliation and understanding are more powerful than force. But it plants the question in Bismuth's episode and leaves it there, sitting in the room, present and unresolved. When Bismuth returns, after Steven accidentally releases her from the bubble, and eventually learns that Rose Quartz was Pink Diamond, that the leader she had been following was herself a diamond, one who had built the system they were rebelling against, her reaction is extraordinary. She makes a dark, exhausted joke. She says she almost gave Rose the idea to fake her own death, that the weapon she built to destroy the diamond leading the crystal gems almost led her to do what Rose actually did anyway. There is a kind of irony in that so heavy it has its own gravity. The breaking point is gone. Steven threw it into lava in the same episode where Bismuth presented it to him, when she asked him to use it and he refused. It is gone, and the war is over, and the question it represents, what it costs to fight a just cause, while refusing to use certain weapons, sits in the narrative unanswered. This is not a failure of the show. This is the show being honest about the kinds of moral questions that do not have solutions, only positions. Bismuth asked the right question. Rose chose not to fully engage with it. The war went the way it went. And the people who paid for Rose's choice were not primarily Rose herself. But let us talk about the Gem War itself in its full shape, because the story of the war is more than Bismuth's question. The war lasted 1,000 years. 1,000 years of Crystal Gem and Homeworld Gem fighting across the surface of Earth, in the air above it, in the spaces between gem installations that had been built during the colonization period, and then became fortifications during the rebellion. The crystal gems began small. Rose and Pearl, founding members, launching a direct attack on Blue Diamond's court at the Cloud Arena early in the rebellion, and gaining Garnet newly formed, still learning what she was as an ally. Rose's acceptance of Garnet's cross-gem fusion became one of the most powerful recruitment tools the rebellion had. Homeworld said that what Garnet was should not exist. Rose said that what Garnet was the most interesting thing she had ever encountered. Gems who had been told by Homeworld that they were wrong began to believe, when they heard this, that they might have been right all along. The army grew. Bismuth built them better weapons, better armor. Hessonite, a Homeworld commander, arrived at Earth to manage the rebellion from Homeworld's side. The Prime Kindergarten kept producing Quartz soldiers for Homeworld. Halfway through the war, Homeworld was struggling. Rose's healing tears allowed the crystal gems to revive their wounded, an advantage that Homeworld could not match. So, Homeworld created the Beta Kindergarten, rushing production in an attempt to get more soldiers in the field quickly. The Beta Kindergarten was a bad environment for gem production. The sandstone hills were lumpy and uneven, the material insufficient, and the whole operation was done too fast and too carelessly. Most of the gems that emerged from the Beta Kindergarten were defective. They came out wrong in various ways, too small, too large, the wrong shape, the wrong capabilities. Only one came out exactly as intended, possibly better. Jasper, Facet 9, Cut 2, 777. She emerged from a site where frictional rock melt and glass had accumulated around her exit hole, and whatever that did to her formation process, it made her exceptional. She was the only fully successful product of a failed kindergarten, and she knew it, and she wore it like armor, and it warped her. We will return to Jasper. She is important, and her story needs its own space. For now, the war could not be won. It could only be ended. And it was ended by Pink Diamond's faked death, which was supposed to be a beginning, a new life for Pink as Rose, a victory that the crystal gems believed was theirs, a future that was supposed to involve living peacefully on the planet they had fought for. Instead, it triggered the corrupting light. The corrupting light was the diamond's answer to grief. 3 beings, each of enormous power, each processing the loss of someone they loved in the only way available to cosmic rulers who have never been taught healthy emotional regulation, by pointing that grief outward and releasing it as a weapon. The light they produced hit the surface of Earth and every gem on it who was not shielded. And then the war was over. and what was left of the crystal gems rose, pearl, garnet, and an earth full of monsters who had once been people began the 5,000-year wait for something that might eventually look like healing. Section 5. The corruption and the cluster. What happened to the ones who were left behind? 5,000 years is a very long time. To understand what the corrupted gems experienced, you have to start with what the corruption actually did to them. It did not kill them. The diamonds, in the moment, believed it had the light looked like an extinction event, and when Homeworld received no further signals from Earth, they concluded that every gem on the planet had been destroyed and moved on. It was not until Steven, thousands of years later, began reporting back to the diamonds that they learned the truth. What the light did was transform, not destroy. The gems caught in the corrupting light kept existing, but they lost the ability to maintain their holographic physical forms in a stable, recognizable way. Their shapes became something other than what they had been: enormous, strange, driven by instinct rather than thought. They could not communicate in language. They could not recognize the people they had known. They had no access to the parts of themselves that remembered being someone before the light hit. What they retained was something more fundamental than memory: a drive, a purpose, a shape of self that no longer had a self to be the shape of. Nephrite, whose corrupted form Steven encounters as the creature he calls Centipedal, was the captain of a squadron sent from Homeworld to Earth. She commanded a crew. She had responsibilities and loyalties and a life that extended back before the war. The monster she became still carried traces of this when Steven managed a partial, temporary restoration of her mind in the episode Monster Reunion. She drew frantically with crayons, trying to express what she remembered. A ship, the crystal gem symbol, the corrupting light, Rose, with her arms out. The implication was clear. She had been someone Rose knew. She had a relationship with Rose that predated or existed alongside the war. Whatever that relationship was, the show leaves it unspecified, which is one of the small, particular sadnesses of the series. Rose bubbled as many corrupted gems as she could. The temple basement, which Steven eventually discovers and then comes to understand, is full of bubbled gem monsters, each one a crystal gem who fought in the rebellion, preserved in stasis because Rose could not heal them and could not bring herself to let them go. She caught them and bubbled them and stored them and waited. For 5,000 years, she waited, not knowing whether there was ever going to be a cure, not knowing whether the beings inside the bubbles were experiencing time in any way or simply existing in a preserved moment, not knowing whether what she was doing was mercy or an extended form of imprisonment. Whether she tried to find a cure and could not, or simply accepted that no cure existed, is something the show does not specify. She had access to healing tears. She used them to revive Lion from death, to heal Pearl's wounds, to give Steven his restorative power. But healing corruption required something she could not produce alone: the combined power of all 4 diamonds working together. She was one diamond, living in secret, without access to the other 3. The cure had existed in theory for 5,000 years. It was simply unavailable. And then there is the cluster. After the war, Homeworld did not simply abandon Earth. The planet was no longer viable as a colony. Only 5% of the colonization had been completed, and the crystal gems were still there, presumably still guarding whatever remained worth guarding. But the gem shards accumulated from thousands of years of gem casualties had to go somewhere. Gem shards, fragments of a gem stone, pieces of what was once a complete being, are still alive in a minimal way. They are aware. They cannot organize that awareness into coherent thought or expression, but the awareness persists. The fragments remember something. Exactly what they remember, the show suggests, is the form they had before they were shattered, and they reach for that form constantly, because it is the only thing they know how to reach for. Homeworld scientists took millions of these shards and combined them, fused them together, forcibly, without the consent that gem fusion requires, without the harmony that healthy fusion produces. They created an entity from this forced combination, an entity made of the fragmented remains of millions of gems who had once had names and purposes and loyalties, and they planted it in the Earth's mantle, where it would incubate and eventually grow large enough to destroy the planet from the inside out. This is the cluster. The cluster is not simply a weapon, it is a weapon made of people. This is the thing the show wants you to sit with when Steven descends into the Earth in the episode Gem Drill and makes contact with it. The cluster is in pain. All those fragments, each one reaching for the form it remembers, pulling in different directions, creating a perpetual internal conflict with no resolution. It cannot be still. It cannot be at peace. It has been like this for thousands of years, growing, suffering, becoming something that will eventually emerge and tear the planet apart simply by existing. Stephen communicates with it, reaches into that fractured consciousness, finds the parts that can respond, helps it find a kind of equilibrium. He helps the cluster understand that it does not have to emerge, that it can choose to stay contained, that it can find something like peace in its current state. He asks it to bubble itself, and it does. This is one of the most remarkable things Stephen does in the entire series, and it is remarkable partly because of what it implies about him. The cluster is not a person in any conventional sense. It is millions of fragments of persons fused together in a way that destroys individual identity. But Stephen treats it as something worth communicating with, worth helping, worth trying to give peace to. He does not see it as a weapon to be destroyed. He sees it as something that is suffering and might be helped. The cluster remains in the Earth's core through the end of the main series. The healing of the corrupted gems in the finale does not visually account for it whether the millions of shards that compose the cluster were restored to individual beings as part of the healing, or whether they remain together in their fused form, in their bubble, at peace in whatever way peace is available to them, is something the show does not address. This is not necessarily a failure. Some questions are too large for a story to fully answer in the time it has. The cluster represents the full accounting of what the Gem Empire cost, not just the crystals and the battle records, but the actual people, the names and purposes that were turned into weapon material. That accounting cannot be completed in a series finale. It probably cannot be completed at all. It is still down there, in the bubble, in the dark, whatever it is, it chose to stay, and perhaps that is enough. Section 6. Lapis Lazuli, the gem who was left in a mirror. There is a particular cruelty in Lapis Lazuli's story that the show understands and does not soften. It is the cruelty of being caught in someone else's war, of having no stake in the conflict but paying the highest possible price for it anyway. Lapis Lazuli was a terraforming gem. Her purpose, according to what she eventually tells Stephen in Steven Universe Future, was to travel to planets designated for colonization and reshape their geological and hydrological features to suit gem construction. She did this without thinking about what she was doing, she admits. She never considered the life that might have existed on those planets before she began reshaping their oceans and their continents. Before she met Stephen, she had never given any of it a second thought. She came to Earth during the colonization period. Exactly why is not fully specified, perhaps as part of the terraforming operation, perhaps as an informant for homeworld forces, perhaps simply because she had been assigned to the Earth colony. Whatever the reason, she was on Earth when the rebellion was actively happening, and she was not a crystal gem. She was a homeworld gem, trying to leave, caught up in a conflict she had no part in starting. Bismuth poofed her. Not maliciously, Bismuth was fighting a war. Lapis was a homeworld gem on the wrong side of the battle lines, and poofing an enemy gem during a war is what you do. Lapis's physical form dissipated, and she retreated into her gem, and then homeworld soldiers found her gem on the ground and made a mistake. They believed she was a crystal gem. The situation was chaotic, the rebellion was at its height, gems were being poofed and captured and interrogated everywhere. Homeworld imprisoned Lapis in a magical mirror, intending to question her about the crystal gems and rose quartz. But Lapis could not answer their questions, because she did not know the answers. She was not a crystal gem. She did not know where rose quartz was hiding. She did not know any of the things they wanted from her. She was just a gem who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Homeworld never figured this out. Or if they did not act on it. Because the evacuations began, and the diamonds released the corrupting light, and every homeworld gem on Earth scrambled to get off the planet before the light hit. In the chaos of the retreat, Lapis's mirror was dropped at the galaxy warp, the transit point where warp pads converged. Retreating homeworld soldiers trampled over it. The trampling cracked her gem, and then everyone was gone. And Lapis was there, in her cracked gem, trapped in a mirror at the galaxy warp, with a damaged stone and no way out and no one who knew she was there. She stayed there for approximately 5,000 years. The show does not dwell on this in a way that tries to make you feel it as a dramatic experience. Because the honest truth is that the human mind cannot fully comprehend what 5,000 years of imprisonment in a mirror actually means. What it does is give you the character who emerged from that imprisonment and trust you to understand what she is carrying by watching how she moves through the world. Pearl eventually found the mirror. She was visiting the galaxy warp and discovered it, and she brought it back to the Crystal Temple, and she used it as a teaching tool, a magical mirror that showed images of whatever you asked it about, connected to gem databases. She showed it to Steven. She gave it to Steven to carry around and ask questions of. And Lapis, inside the mirror, discovered that she could communicate with Steven. That this child, this half-human boy who was nothing like any being she had ever encountered, was actually responding to her. That when she used the mirror to try to speak to him, he listened. That when she tried to show him the word help, he understood it. Nobody in thousands of years had tried to have a conversation with the mirror. Pearl treated it as an object, because that is what it appeared to be. Steven treated it as though there might be someone inside, because Steven treats most things that way as though they might have an interior life worth acknowledging. He freed her. He pulled her gem from the mirror's frame and released her physical form. And the first thing Lapis did was tell Steven not to trust the crystal gems, then fly away using wings of water conjured from her own power, fly toward Homeworld, because that was where she wanted to go. After 5,000 years, all she wanted was to go home. She made it. With a cracked gem, crossing the void between galaxies, she made it to Homeworld. And Homeworld had changed so much since the war ended that she no longer recognized it. The homeworld she remembered was gone. The homeworld she arrived at was Era 2 leaner, more militarized, resource-constrained. The gems who met her there were not the same gems she had known, assuming she had known any at all. She was a stranger in what was supposed to be her home, and then Jasper and Peridot came to Earth to investigate the crystal gems, and they brought Lapis with them as an informant. And so, Lapis came back to Earth, against her will. Brought back to the planet where she had been imprisoned, to help the gem faction that had imprisoned her. The layers of this are almost dizzying when you trace them. She tried to protect Steven from Jasper during the battle that followed. She tried to shield him, tried to limit what information Homeworld got. When Jasper grabbed her and proposed that they fuse, forming the entity called Malachite, which would have been an expression of power and hatred between two gems who despised each other, Lapis made a decision that is one of the most complicated things any character does in the show. She agreed to fuse. And then she took control of the fusion and dragged it to the bottom of the ocean. Her exact words, before she did this, were, "I am done being everyone's prisoner. Now you are going to be mine." She spent months at the bottom of the ocean as half of Malachite, maintaining control of a fusion with a gem who had far more raw power than she did, keeping Jasper contained at the cost of her own freedom. It was, she eventually admits, a complicated form of cruelty. She was punishing Jasper, yes, but she was also re-imprisoning herself, choosing the role of captor over the role of prisoner, because at least captors have power and prisoners have none. It was not healthy, it was not healing, but it was a choice she made with full awareness of what she was doing, and the show treats it as such. When Malachite is eventually defeated and Lapis is freed, she has to figure out what she is now. She is not a Homeworld gem anymore. Homeworld is changed and dangerous, and she was never really a crystal gem. She exists in a kind of stateless condition, on a planet she was imprisoned on, surrounded by gems who let her remain in a mirror for thousands of years without knowing she was there. The show acknowledges this. When the corrupted gems are restored, and the crystal gems ask Steven to get Blue Diamond to try to partially restore Centipedal, the corrupted gem, formerly known as Nephrite Blue's aura, floods the room with emotion, and Lapis just says quietly that she has been through something worse. Not as a complaint, just as a statement of fact, delivered by someone who has been through enough that comparative suffering is simply a data point. She eventually comes to live with Peridot at the barn. She creates art she calls Meep Morps. She watches Camp Pining Hearts. She sleeps, which is apparently something gems do not usually do, and she snores, which Peridot reports on with the air of someone who finds it both exasperating and endearing. She grows something that looks like comfort, if not quite contentment. She grows something that looks like friendship with Peridot, and something that looks like a chosen home on Earth, even if it is not the home she spent 5,000 years waiting to return to. The show gives her as much of a good ending as it can. It is honest that some damage is not fully repaired by a good ending. Section 7. Garnet, Pearl, and Amethyst. 3 lives hidden in plain sight. We have spent a lot of time with the history of the world. Now it is time to spend some time with the people who had to live it. The crystal gems, by the time Stephen meets them, are not the gems they were. 5,000 years changes things. 5,000 years of aftermath, of managing the consequences of a war without the war itself to give them purpose, of being 3 beings on a planet that does not know they exist, protecting a civilization that cannot know what it is being protected from. They have had time to calcify, time to form scar tissue over the parts that hurt, time to develop patterns of behavior that began as coping strategies and eventually became personality. Garnet arrived at the rebellion as something entirely new, a cross-gem fusion that had never existed before, born from the accidental collision of 2 beings from opposite ends of the homeworld hierarchy. Ruby had been a soldier, one of many, interchangeable and expendable. Sapphire had been an aristocrat with future vision, serving in Blue Diamond's court, her predictions forming the basis for military decisions. They had not known each other. They had not chosen each other. A moment of instinctive protectiveness, Ruby throwing herself in front of Sapphire when Pearl's sword was about to reach her, had fused them by accident into something that was neither of them, and also, entirely, both. Garnet, when she found Rose and Pearl, was flooded with questions. How did this happen? What does it mean? Why am I so sure I would rather be this than anything else I was supposed to be? And Rose, who understood something profound in that moment, told her, "No more questions. Don't ever question this. You already are the answer. Love. Garnet is made of love. That is the answer. A love so certain of itself that it created an entirely new person. And that person is stronger and wiser and more stable than either of the people it is made of. Not because either Ruby or Sapphire is insufficient, but because what they are together exceeds what either of them is alone. This does not mean Garnet is simple. The show spends 5 seasons carefully complicating what Garnet is. She has Sapphire's future vision, which means she sometimes sees the outcomes of things before they happen, which means she sometimes makes decisions based on information she cannot share without revealing what she is. She has Ruby's impulse and passion, which means her apparent coolness and stability are not the absence of emotion, but the integration of it, 2 very different emotional registers held together in constant negotiation. When Ruby and Sapphire are fighting, when the negotiation breaks down, Garnet unfuses. It is, the show suggests, one of the most vulnerable things she can do. She has been doing this for 5,000 years, staying fused, staying together, being the stable center around which the other crystal gems organized themselves after the war, after Rose effectively removed herself from the world by having Stephen, after Pearl was left alone with the weight of a secret she could not put down and a grief she could not resolve. Garnet held the crystal gems together not by being emotionally expressive about it, but by simply continuing to be what she was, constantly, year after year, century after century. Being the answer, as Rose had told her she was, being love, visible and unashamed, in a civilization that had told both Ruby and Sapphire that what they were together was a defect. Pearl's story is both simpler and more complicated than Garnet's. Simpler because the shape of it is clearer. She loved rose quartz. She has always loved rose quartz. She has been loving rose quartz in various forms and stages and with various degrees of reciprocation for longer than most civilizations have existed. Complicated because what that love meant, what it required of her, what it cost her, and what she has been left with after Rose is gone, all of that is genuinely complex. Pearl was created to be an attendant, an accessory, something that carries things and looks decorative and follows instructions. This is what the gem civilization designed her to be. From the moment the injector deposited her essence into whatever stone she formed in, to the moment she emerged and was given to Pink Diamond, she was property. Valuable property, perhaps, but property. Rose quartz pink in disguise. But Rose nonetheless told Pearl something that changed the direction of everything. Early in their relationship, Pearl had asked Pink to command her to stop exercising her own imagination, to give up her own thoughts in favor of simply serving, and Pink said, "Never stop." Not as a command given to a servant, as a recognition of a person. This moment is the seed of everything Pearl becomes. From that recognition forward, Pearl chose Rose and fought for Rose and became the person fighting made her. She trained herself to fight when pearls are not designed to fight. She mastered tactics and strategy and kept the Crystal Gems' historical records, and ran the temple systems and developed expertise in areas far outside the narrow function she was created for. She did all of this because Rose believed she could, and Pearl believed Rose's belief. She loved Rose. The show makes this clear and does not flinch from it. Not the transactional devotion of a servant to an owner. Love complicated, consuming, not entirely reciprocated in the way Pearl needed, and complicated further by the fact that Rose was not entirely honest with Pearl about who she was and what she needed from her. Rose needed Pearl to keep the secret of Pink Diamond's identity, and so Pearl kept it, under a compulsion so deep that it was physically impossible for her to speak the words even when speaking them would have helped. That compulsion lasted for the entire 5,000 years of Rose's life as Rose Quartz, and through Steven's childhood, and into the present of the show's main timeline. When Greg Universe arrived on that beach with his van and his synthesizer and his Buddy Holly songs, Pearl experienced something she had no framework for. Rose was interested. Not in the way Rose was interested in everything with an anthropologist's delight, a diamond's curiosity, an observer's engaged attachment. Genuinely interested, falling in love. Choosing this human man in a way that was different from how she had chosen Pearl, and that had consequences Pearl would spend decades trying to understand. What hurts, if you track Pearl's arc carefully, is not simply that Rose chose Greg. It is that Rose chose to have Steven, which required giving up her physical form, which meant leaving Pearl behind with the full weight of 5,000 years of shared experience, and a compulsion never to explain the most important part of any of it. Rose gave Pearl a gift, the gift of being seen, of being told she could be more than what she was made to be, of 1,000 years of rebellion and purpose, and then she handed Pearl a burden and disappeared before Pearl could decide how she felt about any of it. The song It's Over, Isn't It?, which Pearl sings in the Season 3 episode Mr. Greg, is 3 minutes of this. Pearl on a rooftop in a city, watching the stars, singing about what she lost and what it cost her, and how she cannot quite stop loving what is gone, even though it has been gone for years and is never coming back in any form she can hold. The song is devastating and gorgeous, and it does not resolve into hope at the end the way musical numbers are supposed to. It simply ends with Pearl having named what she has been carrying, and the night going on around her without changing. Peridot deserves her own section within this one, because her arc is among the most complete and satisfying character journeys in the show. She arrives on Earth as a technician sent by Yellow Diamond to check on the cluster, an Era 2 Peridot, smaller and less innately powerful than her predecessors, reliant on limb enhancers for her combat and technical capabilities. She is, when we meet her, exactly what Homeworld designed her to be: efficient, analytical, dismissive of anything that does not fit into the categories the Gem Empire provided her with, and entirely convinced that this dismissal is a form of intelligence rather than limitation. She refers to the crystal gems as clods. She refers to fusion as a combat tactic for weak gems. She refers to the Earth as a low-priority planet of negligible significance, and to organic life in general as something between an inconvenience and a category error. She has the confidence of someone who has never been required to question anything they were taught, because the teaching came from an authority that did not permit questioning. And then the crystal gems will not let her leave. She gets stranded on Earth. She cannot get back to Homeworld. She has to stay. And staying, with all the specific chaos and emotional texture that staying on Earth with the crystal gems involves, begins the process of dismantling the framework she was built to operate within. The show is careful and generous about how long this takes. Peridot does not instantly become warm and open. She remains, for quite a long time, someone who considers herself definitionally superior to the beings around her and finds their emotional expressiveness baffling and inefficient. She tries to contact Yellow Diamond to warn her about the cluster, and Yellow Diamond does not listen, and this is the first time in Peridot's existence that the authority she believed in has failed to be the correct answer. She does not know what to do with this. She processes it by calling Yellow Diamond a clod, which is both incredibly funny and a genuinely significant character moment. She learns to fuse with Garnet, She discovers that she has technopathic abilities, the ability to manipulate metal with her mind, that she did not know she had, because Era 2 gems were told they were simpler than their predecessors. She was told she lacked something. What she actually had was a different set of abilities than what the Gem Empire expected from her, which is true of most people who are told they are deficient. They are not deficient, they are unexpected. By the time she is formally part of the Crystal Gems, she is someone Pearl can argue with, and Amethyst can be chaotic alongside, and Garnet can regard with the particular quiet warmth Garnet has for beings who are trying to figure themselves out. She is someone who watches terrible television with Lapis and debates the merits of characters in shows neither of them has any business caring about. She is someone who makes art meet morps, as she and Lapis call them, assemblages of earth objects and gem energy that are strange and funny and often more emotionally revealing than either of them intends. She is, by the end, definitively herself, which is the only destination worth arriving at. The off-colors fluorite, rhodonite, Padparadscha, and the rutile twins represent a specific kind of story the show tells quietly in the background of its larger arcs. They are gems who were born wrong by homeworld standards and have spent their entire existence hiding in abandoned tunnels to avoid being shattered. Fluorite is a fusion of 6 gems, moving and thinking in a slow and deliberate way that is entirely her own. Rhodonite is a fusion of a ruby and a pearl, 2 gems whose classes should not fuse, and whose continued existence as Morganite is a daily act of defiance against a system that would destroy her for existing. The rutile twins emerged from the same exit hole, sharing a body with 2 heads, and have been considered defective and aberrant by Homeworld ever since. Padparadscha is a sapphire whose future vision is delayed. Other sapphires see the future. Padparadscha sees the immediate past the thing that just happened, which she announces with complete sincerity and absolute confidence, moments after everyone present has already witnessed it. Her off-color companions love her without qualification. They do not treat her delayed vision as a flaw to be corrected or a disability to be accommodated. They treat it as the particular shape of who she is. The show's camera treats it the same way. Padparadscha is not the punchline. Her timing is the joke, but the love she exists within is not a joke at all. Lars leads them home. And then he comes home himself, changed in ways that are immediately apparent and in ways that take longer to surface. He is pink. He does not age the same way. His hair is a portal. He goes back to the big donut, and the person who comes back is recognizably Lars, and also unmistakably not the Lars who left. The show handles the strangeness of this with its characteristic lightness, Lars just getting on with things, adjusting to the specifics of his new existence with the pragmatism of someone who has already dealt with several things more difficult than having luminous pink skin. Amethyst's history is different from the others in a fundamental way. She does not have one, not the way Pearl and Garnet do. She was not there for the war. She was incubating in the prime kindergarten while it happened, taking longer than an amethyst is supposed to take, coming out shorter than an amethyst is supposed to be, emerging 500 years after the war, ended into a world that had already moved on from it. She was alone when she came out. The kindergarten was empty. The war was over. The Crystal Temple was occupied, but she did not know that yet. She learned the world on her own terms, spending some time existing in solitude and confusion until Rose and Pearl found her a young amethyst who did not know what she was or what she was supposed to be, who had no homeworld instruction and no crystal gem context, and nothing but her own instincts to organize herself around. Rose welcomed her. Of course she did. And Amethyst became part of the crystal gems, and she was loved, and she found a home and a family. But the origin story she carries being the last gem made on Earth, 500 years late, coming from a kindergarten that everybody else had moved on from, is something she has never fully resolved. She turns it into jokes. Loud, physical, deflecting jokes that put the uncomfortable thing at arm's length before anyone else can reach it first. She knows she came from a place that the crystal gems consider a scar on the earth. She knows that the kindergarten she was born from represents the harm they were all fighting against. She has been carrying that since the moment she first heard what a kindergarten was. Her arc in the show is, at its core, about learning to be herself rather than a version of herself designed to make other people comfortable. She learns this imperfectly and repeatedly and with enormous amounts of setbacks. But she learns it. By the end, Amethyst knows who she is. She knows it in the way you know something you had to work to understand, which is the most durable kind of knowing there is. Section 8. Steven Universe: What He Actually Is. Halfway through the second season, the show starts quietly preparing you for a question it will spend the rest of its run trying to answer. The question is not what is Steven. The question is who is Steven, and whether those two questions have the same answer. Steven Quartz Universe was born to Greg Universe and Rose Quartz on an unspecified date in the early 2000s in what appears to be a very small town on the coast of what the show calls Delmarva, which in our world is just a peninsula. Rose had been in love with Greg for a period that the show suggests was at least a couple of years, possibly longer. Their courtship, glimpsed through flashbacks, is one of the warmest and strangest and most charming things in the series. Two beings from completely different worlds figuring out how to make something real together. Rose wanted to experience something she could not experience as a gem. She wanted to know what it was to begin, not to continue, which is all gems do. They form. They persist, they grow, but they begin only once, in the stone, in a darkness they cannot remember. She wanted to know what it was to start small and uncertain and without form, to grow into something, to become, and the only way to experience that was to give up the form she had and become part of something new. She gave up her physical existence to create Steven. Her gem, her actual gem, the physical stone that was the center of her being passed to him, he was born with it embedded in his navel. Pink, like the gem it was, and slightly different from the way it had looked in Rose's body, because Steven is not Rose, and the gem exists in a different context now. He has her power, most of it. The shield, the healing tears, the protective bubbles, the ability to fuse with humans, which should be impossible for a gem and which Steven does without apparent effort, the ability to enter dreams and communicate mind to mind with other beings, the ability to grow plants from his saliva. He does not have her memories, which the show treats as a mercy and a burden simultaneously. He did not inherit the context for any of what he was given. He also has Greg's biology. He ages, he gets sick, he gets hungry, he feels pain. His bones break and his body heals them, but the healing leaves marks. The episode Growing Pains, which may be the most quietly harrowing episode in the entire series, shows Steven at a doctor for the first time, and the X-ray reveals the history of every injury he has sustained across 14 years of being half alien in a world that was not designed for him. The breaks, the fractures, the stress damage that his gem power allowed him to walk through without acknowledging. All of it visible in the image of his skeleton, which looks like the bones of a person who has been through a war. He has been through a war. He has been through multiple wars. He just did not always realize it was happening. Steven Universe Future, the 20-episode epilogue series that follows the movie and the events of Change Your Mind, is about what happens to a person who has spent their entire childhood being the solution to everyone else's problems. It is about the accumulation of experiences that never got processed, of tragedies that were moved through too quickly, of a role healer, mediator, the person everyone depends on that left no room for Steven to be anything else, including hurt. The pink power that surfaces in Future is something the show frames very carefully. It is Pink Diamond's power, specifically the same cosmic force that, used collectively with the other diamonds, produced the corrupting light. When Steven loses control, the thing that comes through is not some generalized gem ability. It is the specific, ancient, enormous power of a diamond surfacing through a teenager who has no instruction manual for it. He grows large. His skin flushes pink. He generates heat and energy that destabilizes other gems. He accidentally shatters Jasper during a training session and is forced to use diamond-level healing power to restore her, an act that takes everything he has. The show is honest that this power is not a gift in the way Steven's other powers are. It is a consequence. The pressure that builds, the unprocessed grief and anger and guilt and fear, eventually finds its way out through the biggest opening available, which is a gem that once belonged to a diamond. His body treats moderate stress the same way it treats a threat to his life, because for most of his life, moderate stress and threats to his life have been the same thing. By the end of Future, Steven has transformed into a monster, not a metaphorical one, a literal one, enormous, pink, crystalline, barely recognizable as the person he was. The thing he has become is a gem monster, corrupted not by the diamond's light but by his own unprocessed interior life. It is the show making its central metaphor as literal as possible. This is what happens when a person absorbs too much without ever letting any of it out. The people who love him bring him back, not by fighting the monster, by reaching the person inside it. Connie, Greg, Garnet, Pearl, Amethyst, even the diamonds, all of them coming to the place where Steven is and saying, in various ways, that they see him. Not the healer, not the solution, the person. Steven, he comes back, and then he gets in a van and leaves Beach City, carrying his mother's gem and his father's music and the friendships and chosen family he built through 14 years of impossible circumstances, going somewhere he has not defined yet, but that is definitively his own. The show is careful, and I think honest, about the fact that this is not a resolution to the metaphysical question of what Steven is. He is still half of something ancient. His gem still contains the physical remains of a consciousness that once ran an empire. Whether Rose in any form persists inside him, whether she experiences anything through him, whether she is information or presence or something else entirely, is a question the show raises and then sits with, letting it remain open. It is probably the right call. That question does not have an answer that would feel honest. The honest answer is the uncertainty itself. Section 9. The songs that carry what words cannot. Rebecca Sugar wrote songs for Adventure Time before she got to make her own show. She brought that understanding that songs and animation can do things that dialogue cannot, that music reaches parts of a story that spoken language cannot access to every level of Steven Universe's design. The show has more than 100 songs. Most of them are plot relevant. Many of them are lore dense. All of them are emotionally precise in a way that reveals how much of the story is being told in registers other than the obvious one. It's Over, Isn't It?, which Pearl sings while standing on a rooftop during the Season 3 episode Mr. Greg is the clearest example of a song delivering information about a character that 5 seasons of dialogue had been carefully avoiding stating directly. Pearl loved Rose, not as a servant loves an owner, not as a soldier loves a cause. She loved her the way people love when they have given everything they have to someone, and the someone has gone, and they are still there, holding all of it. The song does not explain this, it expresses it. There is a difference. An explanation tells you what happened. An expression makes you understand what it felt like. The song is 3 minutes of what it felt like, and it is more information about Pearl than most of her dialogue scenes across the first 3 seasons combined. Here Comes a Thought, sung by Garnet with Steven and Connie in Season 4, is a meditation on anxiety on the way intrusive thoughts arrive and spiral and seem larger than they are. It is also quietly about Sapphire. Sapphire has future vision. She sees probable outcomes of events before they happen. This is useful in a strategic sense and deeply disorienting in a personal one. Imagine being unable to stop your mind from running through everything that might happen, all the possible outcomes, the branching paths of a single moment. Here Comes a Thought is about learning to exist in a moment rather than in all the possible versions of that moment simultaneously. Garnet sings it because Garnet is, every day, the integration of a being who perceives time in a non-linear way. The song is her wisdom, hard-won over 5,000 years of being a fusion. What's the use of feeling blue, which Yellow Diamond sings in the Human Zoo episode, is character revelation disguised as dismissal. Yellow wants Blue to stop grieving. She wants her sister, and the show is honest that the diamonds are something like family, whatever family means for beings who have never been parented and never had to figure out what love is without a model to come back to work, to stop mourning someone who has been gone for thousands of years, to acknowledge that the mourning has gone on long enough. The song is brisk and its logic is sound, and the entire time Yellow is singing it, her own grief is audible in the way she insists grief is useless. You cannot convince someone that feelings are pointless if you do not have the feelings. Yellow has the feelings. She has been running from them at speed for thousands of years. The song is her running from them in real time, in 4 minutes, in front of Blue and the audience. Change Your Mind, the title track of the Season 5 finale, is the show's thesis statement. It is Steven singing directly to White Diamond, not as a soldier fighting a battle, but as a person talking to another person, insisting on the possibility of change, refusing to accept that anyone is defined permanently by what they have been. The song is gentle until it is not. It starts as a plea and becomes a declaration. You do not have to be what they made you to be. You are allowed to be someone else. The world will not end if you admit you were wrong. White Diamond hears it. Something shifts. The change is not simple or clean or complete, but the song does something that no weapon could do, which is reach past the armor of a being who has spent uncountable years being certain that she is the correct answer to every question, and make her feel uncertain. Not defeated, uncertain, which is the beginning of every meaningful change. Love Like You, which plays over the show's end credits throughout its run, is sung by Rebecca Sugar in her own voice. It is written from Rose's perspective, or from the perspective of someone who loves with overwhelming intensity and is afraid that the person they love will eventually realize they deserve better. The lyrics are about the gap between how someone sees themselves and how they are seen by the people who love them. I always thought I might be bad. Now I'm sure of it. It's true. The song is full of this. The fear that love is contingent on not being fully known. The way a person who has done harm can come to believe that they are fundamentally harmful, that the love they receive is a mistake that will eventually be corrected. It is possible to read this as Rose's private reckoning with her own history, the bismuth incident, the spinel abandonment, Pearl's compelled silence, all of it. The song that plays quietly under the show's lighter moments, as a reminder that the woman at the center of all of it was carrying something heavy, always, even when she smiled. Stronger Than You, which Garnet sings during the Season 1 finale when she fights Jasper, works on multiple levels simultaneously and they do not cancel each other out. On the surface level, it is a fight song, defiant and danceable and building to a chorus that sounds like a declaration of victory before the victory is secured. On the character level, it is Garnet revealing herself not just as a fusion, but as a permanent fusion. A fusion born of love rather than combat necessity, something Jasper's worldview has no category for. And on the thematic level, it is the show's most condensed statement of what Garnet represents. She is made of love. She is stronger than you because of it. Not in spite of the vulnerability that love involves, but because of it. The song was written by Rebecca Sugar and sung by Estelle, who is a musician before she is a voice actress, and this matters. Estelle does not perform Garnet's music as someone playing a character. She performs it as a singer who has inhabited something. The inflection she puts on the word love, the particular weight of it. The absence of irony in it is doing an enormous amount of work. Escapism, which Steven sings late in Season 5 while projecting his consciousness into a watermelon clone of himself floating in a distant ocean, is one of the most unusual musical moments in the show. Steven, disembodied, cut off from everyone who loves him, navigating an unfamiliar body on an unfamiliar island, trying to figure out how to get back. The song is about exactly what its name says, the desire to be somewhere else, the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being far from home and unable to get back quickly. It is also quietly about what it means to be Steven, specifically the constant displacement, the way he spends so much of his existence in someone else's territory, navigating situations that were not designed for him to navigate. Stronger Than You has become one of the show's signature songs in the way that certain songs from animated shows become cultural artifacts that outlast their context. The song contains the show's philosophy in concentrated form. It is about choosing love as a source of strength rather than an alternative to it. About how Homeworld's framework fusion is weakness, emotion is liability, the only real power is the power of individual force, is simply wrong, demonstrably and immediately wrong, because Garnet is standing there existing, and she is stronger than Jasper, and she is standing there made of love. My Little Reason Why, which is the song Steven sings in Future after he has returned to Beach City, and the Gems and Greg and Connie have staged something that functions as an intervention, is perhaps the most emotionally direct moment in the entire franchise. Steven has spiraled. He has nearly shattered White Diamond while she was allowing him to inhabit her body. He has been having violent, intrusive thoughts. He tells the people who love him all of this in a song, because that is how the show works. The song does not resolve into hope at the end. It ends with Steven having said what he could not say and the people who love him being with him in it. And then, the music carries the final 2 episodes, Steven's transformation into the monster. The moment his friends realize they have been reaching toward him wrong, trying to fix what he became instead of being with who he is, the moment the diamonds arrive, And for once, they are not the problem. They are just enormous beings in grief who love Steven and are terrified that they cannot fix this for him. And then Connie's voice, telling the crowd that Steven does not need to be fixed. He needs to be loved. And then the music, and the light, and Steven coming back. Ivy and Surashu, who composed the instrumental score, gave the show a musical identity unlike anything else in children's animation. Soft synthesizers and acoustic piano. Melodies that appear in one character's theme and then subtly reappear in another's during a moment of emotional connection, creating a kind of musical rhyme across episodes and seasons. The score is not decorative, it is narrative. It tells you what to feel about a moment before anyone says anything, and it tells you how what is happening now connects to what happened before. The music is the emotional archaeology of the show. Beneath the plot, beneath the lore, beneath the battles and the reveals and the mysteries, there is music. And the music is doing what the words cannot fully do, which is make you feel the weight of a world that has been going on for a very long time. Section 10. Beach City and the humans who lived next to a war. Everything we have discussed so far has been enormous in scale. Galaxies, millennia, Diamond Authority, corruption events. Weapons designed to shatter beings whose existence is measured in thousands of years. And then there is Beach City. Beach City is a small coastal settlement on the fictional state of Delmarva, which, in the show's geography, exists on the large peninsula that separates the Chesapeake Bay from the Atlantic Ocean. It has a boardwalk. It has a fry shop called Fish Stew Pizza, run by the Fryman family. It has a big donut, a mechanic, a farmer, a lighthouse, an art dealer, a mayor, and a community of people who mostly know each other and have been there their whole lives. Attached to the beach, built into the cliffside, is the Crystal Temple. It has been there since before anyone in Beach City can remember. The people of Beach City live adjacent to a magical alien installation and have developed, over the generations, a particular relationship to this fact. The relationship is characterized primarily by not asking questions. Mayor Dewey, who runs the town for most of the series, is aware that the crystal gems exist. He has struck what amounts to an implicit bargain with them. They protect the town from the various threats that periodically descend on it, and he maintains the polite fiction that everything is normal and asks no follow-up questions about the alien warriors living on the beach. When homeworld ships appear in the sky over Beach City, Mayor Dewey's response is to get in a van and drive away, while broadcasting a recorded message telling his constituents to take care of yourselves, I guess. He is not a hero. He is a man who made a calculation about what kind of not knowing was survivable. Ronaldo Fryman, the oldest son of the fry shop owner, runs a blog called Keep Beach City Weird and has been documenting paranormal activity in the area for years. He has photographs, recorded anomalies, witness statements. He knows something has been happening in Beach City for as long as anyone can remember. He does not have the correct framework to interpret his evidence, which means his blog entries are simultaneously accurate in their observations and wildly wrong in their conclusions. He gets close to the truth sometimes. Nobody tells him when he does. There is something both comic and genuinely pointed about Ronaldo. He is right. He has been right for years. And the Crystal Gems, who have been protecting his town and his family and his world, have never once sat him down and said, actually, yes, here is what is going on. They maintain the fiction that it is easier not to know. They are probably right that it would be complicated to tell him. But the show notices that there is something uncomfortable about a group of beings who protect a community while keeping the community in the dark about what they are being protected from. Connie Maheswaran is the human who bridges the gap. She is Steven's best friend and eventually much more than that. She is the daughter of a doctor and a military man, raised with high expectations and specific rules and the kind of structure that can feel like love but can also feel like a cage depending on the day. She is also one of the most capable people in the show. She learns to sword fight. She fuses with Steven to form Stevani, which should be impossible, and which they both approach with the easy confidence of people who have already accepted that most things that should be impossible are actually just things that have not been tried by the right person yet. Her parents are forced to reckon with what Connie's life actually involves. Her mother, Dr. Maheswaran, has the show's most direct parental confrontation with this reality in the episode Nightmare Hospital, which handles it with the show's characteristic combination of humor and genuine emotional weight. Her father takes longer, and the show does not rush his arc, which is respectful of the fact that some people need more time. Greg Universe is the human who loved Rose Quartz most completely, not in the sense of loving her most, but in the sense of loving her in a way that most fully saw her. Rose, who had been the leader of a rebellion and the keeper of enormous secrets and a presence so large that everyone around her organized their life around her, fell in love with a man who played synthesizer covers of Buddy Holly songs in a van and called himself Mr. Universe. Greg did not know who she was. He did not know what she was. He just knew that he wanted to be around her and that she seemed to actually enjoy his company, which surprised him daily. What made Greg different from everyone else in Rose's life is that he was genuinely curious about her without needing anything from her. Pearl needed Rose's approval. Garnet needed Rose's leadership. Amethyst needed Rose's acceptance. Greg just wanted to know who she was. He asked her questions, not because he needed the answers to function, but because the answers interested him. He sang her bad songs and she loved them. He told her about his family and his childhood and his dreams, and she listened with the absolute attention of someone who had never had someone talk to her about ordinary things. He did not know she was a diamond. She did not tell him. He did not know about bismuth or spinel or the full extent of what she had done and failed to do across thousands of years. There are things about this that are uncomfortable, and the show does not entirely dodge the discomfort. Greg fell in love with a version of Rose that was, if not a lie, certainly incomplete. She was real, just not entirely disclosed. Whether she would have eventually told him more, whether there were things she was building toward saying, the show cannot tell us, because she is gone before the show begins. What Greg has, after Rose is gone, is Steven. And Steven is, in Greg's own words, the best thing that ever happened to him, which is both an expression of genuine love and a complicated thing to be, being the best thing, being the reason someone you never knew chose to stop existing. Steven carries this too. He carries a lot. Lars Barriga deserves his own extended treatment because his arc is one of the most unexpected and most resonant in the entire show. Lars begins the series as a complicated, somewhat antagonistic presence. He works at the Big Donut with Sadie Miller, who he clearly cares about and clearly cannot figure out how to say so. He is insecure and defensive and often cruel in the casual way that people are when they feel like they are perpetually being evaluated and found wanting. Steven likes him anyway. Steven likes almost everyone, but the affection he has for Lars is particular and persistent in the face of repeated unkindness, which is its own quiet form of heroism. Lars ends up in space. Through a complicated chain of events involving gem warships and Homeworld and Steven getting captured, Lars is present when things go catastrophically wrong, and he is killed. He is dead. Not poofed, not destabilized, not made unconscious dead, in the way that humans die. And then Steven, in his grief, holds him and cries, and his healing tears fall on Lars. And Lars comes back, pink. His hair becomes a portal to Lion's main dimension. He ages very slowly. He does not eat anymore, does not need to. He is the second being that Rose's healing tears have brought back from death, and his transformation is essentially identical to what must have happened to Lion. The same mechanism, the same consequence. Lars came back pink and magical, because the same power that brought Lion back through the same means. He is a living echo of an event that happened hundreds of years before he was born. He leads the Off-Colors home. He becomes a captain, essentially, the human leading a crew of gem refugees across intergalactic space in a ship that runs on his own hair. He finds something out there. Purpose, confidence, the discovery that he is capable of being exactly the person the situation requires when the situation is large enough that his self-consciousness becomes irrelevant. He comes back to Beach City changed. The show handles this with quiet care, without overstating what happened or making his transformation into a simple hero arc. He is still Lars. He is just Lars who has been to space and back from death and is now pink. Section 11. What was left open? The questions the show did not answer. We have covered an enormous amount of ground. The gem civilization, the diamonds, Pink Diamond's life and death and rebirth as Rose and then as Steven, the crystal gems and their histories, the corruption, the cluster, Lapis and her imprisonment, the songs and what they carry, Beach City and the humans who lived next to a war. And still, there are things the show left open, not by accident, not as oversights, The things left open are the things the show decided were more interesting as questions than they would be as answers. The wooden chest in Lion's pocket dimension sits under the tree where it has always been. Everything else in that dimension was explained across the series: the VHS tape, the sword, the battle flag, the photograph of Rose and Greg, the Mr. Universe shirt, Bismuth's bubble. The chest received no explanation. In Steven Universe the movie, Steven makes a brief trip into the dimension during the film, and if you are paying attention, you can see that the chest is open in the background of that shot. Open, and then the shot ends. We do not see what was inside. The film moves on without commenting on it. Rebecca Sugar has not said what was in the chest. The writers have stayed quiet on it. Whether they had something specific in mind and never had the space to tell it, or whether the open chest is a deliberate image, the thing Rose kept that Steven eventually found, private, resolved in his own way without the audience needing to witness, it remains unknown. The fan theories are extensive. The most emotionally resonant one is that the chest contained things from before Pink Diamond became Rose Quartz, items from her life as a diamond that she could not bring as Rose and could not bring herself to discard. Mementos of a self she had officially given up. Lion himself is a mystery with known edges and an unknown center. The show confirms that Rose resurrected him. It confirms, through the parallel of Lars's resurrection, exactly what the mechanism of that resurrection was. It does not confirm how Lion died, or when, or why. Rose's tears fell on this Lion and not the others in the pack that Buddy Budwick's journal places her among. Whether Lion died protecting her, whether he died of something ordinary, something she was not expecting, and the tears that fell were simply grief refusing to accept the fact of the loss. The show leaves this in a particular quality of silence that feels chosen rather than forgotten. The corrupting light's full accounting was never completed on screen. The healing at the end of Change Your Mind is shown as a total healing, a wave of diamond power sweeping across the earth and restoring every corrupted gem at once. But 5,000 years is a very long time to be what they were. The gems that Steven fought and bubbled across 5 seasons of the main series, were all of them restored? Were there gems whose corruption had lasted so long or gone so deep that restoration was not fully possible? The show presents the healing as complete and does not examine the question. The human zoo on the moon. Blue Diamond built it for Pink, preserving humans taken from Earth 6,000 years ago. The descendants of those humans now several hundred generations removed from anyone who remembered what Earth was. Steven encounters them. Some of them choose to leave. They go to Earth, or they were meant to, the show implies. What happened to them is left entirely open. What it means to be a human from a moon zoo, arriving on the planet your distant ancestors were taken from, finding yourself in a world with no context for what you have been through, the show does not have space for this story. It is one of the ones that exists in the space between the frame and the edge of the image. Jasper stands at the end of the main series healed, uncorrupted, standing beside Amethyst, the other Earthborn quartz. She is not redeemed in any conventional sense. She does not adopt the crystal gem's values. She does not apologize. She does not appear to have had a moment of moral clarity in which she decided that everything she believed was wrong. She was corrupted and then healed, and now she is standing there, next to a gem who came from the same kindergarten planet as she did, and the show ends. What Jasper does next? What she does with the knowledge that Pink Diamond was Rose Quartz? That the leader she served and the enemy she fought were the same person wearing different faces? The show does not say. She is just there, healed, present, unaccounted for, and that might be the most realistic thing the show does with her. The moral ledger of Rose Quartz is one of the things the show opens and cannot close, because the person who should be closing it is gone. Steven's arc in Future is in part the arc of a person coming to understand that they are allowed to be angry. Not just sad, not just grieved, but specifically, legitimately angry at someone who loved them and also left them enormous amounts of damage to carry. His therapist, a human woman who does not fully understand the specifics of the situation but understands grief and inheritance well enough to be useful, helps him find the language for this. He says it out loud. He is angry at his mother. He loves his mother. Both of those things are true at the same time, and neither one cancels the other. The show's treatment of Rose is, in the end, a study in how we construct and then deconstruct the image of people we love. Steven begins the show with an image of his mother assembled from the things people who loved her told him. She was brave, she was compassionate, she loved the earth, she loved him. this image is true. It is not complete. As the seasons progress, the image fills in with things that are harder to hold alongside the beauty. She sealed bismuth away rather than engage with an argument she could not fully answer. She left Pearl under a compulsion that caused thousands of years of psychological harm. She abandoned Spinel in a garden for 6,000 years and then stopped thinking about her entirely. She could not find a cure for the crystal gems she had caught and bubbled, or did not try hard enough to find one, and the show does not specify which. And yet, she also started a rebellion that saved an entire planet. She accepted Garnet's existence as a fusion when Homeworld would have destroyed her. She chose to love Greg in the full knowledge of what that choice would require of her. She made a videotape for a person she would never meet, and the tape is imperfect, and the imperfection is visible, and the love in it is also visible and also real. The show asks you to hold all of this, not to resolve it into a verdict. Not to decide that she was good or bad, hero or villain, that the harm cancels the love or the love excuses the harm. It asks you to understand that people who love us and people who hurt us are sometimes the same person, and that what we do with that inheritance is up to us. That is the work Steven is doing at the end of Future, not deciding who his mother was, but deciding who he is going to be in light of all the things she was. What he is going to carry forward and what he is going to set down. He gets in the van and he goes, "That is the best possible answer the show could give," and the show knew it. Pearl's phone has a number in it. In the episode Last One Out of Beach City, Pearl goes to a concert and meets a woman with short pink hair. Not a dead ringer for Rose, not a double. Just someone who has something in the line of her jaw, the color of her hair, that catches Pearl's eye. The woman gives Pearl her number. Pearl acquires a mobile phone specifically to be able to call it, and then the series ends and we never find out if she called. Whether she stood in the temple with the phone in her hand and could not make herself press the button, whether she called and got voicemail, whether she called and someone answered, Pearl deserved to try. Whether she did is one of the things the show left quietly open in a way that feels less like an oversight and more like a deliberate acknowledgement that some stories are too private to be witnessed. Spinell's question what Pink Diamond intended and whether she ever thought about the garden again is the most emotionally straightforward of the show's unresolved threads. There is no lore mystery here in the conventional sense. There is just the shape of a cruelty that was not quite intentional and was never acknowledged. Pink Diamond created Spinel specifically as a companion. This is worth sitting with because it tells you something about what Pink needed that the Gem Empire was not providing. She needed a friend. Not a servant, not an advisor with future vision, not a construction gem who could build things for her. She needed someone who would play with her, who would be delighted by the same things she was delighted by, who would be happy just to be with her. Spinel was designed for this. Her gem, her personality, her physical form, everything about her was optimized for companionship and play. And Pink played with her. They were happy together, the show implies, for a period of time. Then Pink grew older, or at least different. And the qualities that made Spinel perfect for what Pink had needed at one stage became qualities that felt childish and embarrassing at a later stage. Pink was trying to be taken seriously by the other diamonds. A bouncy, stretchy playmate gem who existed to entertain her was not consistent with the image she was building. So she left her in the garden. She told her to stand still and wait. She made it a game, which is possibly the cruelest part of it, making the waiting feel like participation, giving Spinel a role that kept her frozen in place for longer than all of recorded human history. The show frames this as Pink's immaturity rather than malice, and the framing is probably honest. Pink was not calculating when she left Spinel behind. She was not thinking that far ahead. She was moving toward the next thing and not thinking clearly about what she was leaving. She was young, in diamond terms. She made a thoughtless choice. And then she got swept up in the earth and the rebellion and becoming Rose and becoming Steven, and at some point the thought of Spinel either surfaced and was pushed back down or never surfaced at all. The forget-me-nots in the garden. If you pay attention during Spinel's backstory in the movie, the garden she has been standing in for 6,000 years is full of them, forget-me-nots. Flowers named specifically after the act of not being forgotten. Whether Pink planted them before she left, which would suggest she knew, on some level, that she might not come back, and planted a marker of her regret before she disappeared, or whether they grew there over the centuries on their own, a cosmic irony written in the landscape around a gem who was very much forgotten, The movie does not say. There is a reading of Pink Diamond where the forget-me-nots are the most damning detail in the franchise. If she planted them knowing she was leaving, she was asking not to be forgotten by someone she was about to forget. She was asking Spinel to hold her in her memory while she made no corresponding commitment. Spinel ends the movie with the 3 remaining diamonds, who love her immediately and without reservation 3 rulers who have caused enormous harm and are trying to do better, falling for a gem whose entire capacity is joy and play and the kind of companionship that does not ask anything in return. There is something genuinely warm about this ending, something that functions as healing. But Pink is gone. She cannot apologize. She cannot explain what she was thinking. The conversation Spinel deserved to have never happened and cannot happen now, which means whatever Spinel makes of her 6,000 years is something she has to do without the context she was owed. The show leaves this in the background and calls it resolved because Spinel is smiling. Maybe that is enough. Maybe healing does not require explanation from the person who caused the harm. Maybe it just requires being loved by the people who are present. Maybe. The show believes so. It says so with Spinel's ending. I am not entirely sure, and I think the show understands that I am not entirely sure, and that this understanding is part of what it was trying to create. The question of White Diamond's origin, where the diamonds came from, what existed before them, whether they were made or simply became, is the deepest unresolved thread in the show's cosmology. The show gestures at a possibility, that White Diamond produced yellow, blue, and pink from herself, the way white light contains all colors. But even if that is true, it only moves the question back one step. What is White Diamond? What was there before White Diamond? The show cannot answer this, and I think the honest answer is that the people making the show did not fully know the answer either, which is not a criticism. Some things are mysteries at the center of a system because the mystery is more generative than any answer could be. Section 12. Where we leave it the shore of all that was left open. Before we close, there is one more thing worth sitting with, which is the question of what kind of show this was and what it did to children's animation while it was running. Steven Universe aired on Cartoon Network from 2013 to 2019, with the epilogue series running into early 2020. This was a specific moment in the history of children's television, a moment when the audiences for these shows were getting more sophisticated, when the people making them were getting more ambitious, when the old assumption that children needed simplified stories and uncomplicated emotions was being quietly set aside by a generation of creators who had grown up on the very shows that held that assumption and felt, viscerally, that it was wrong. Steven Universe was not the only show doing this. Adventure Time had been doing it for several years before Steven Universe began. Gravity Falls was doing it at the same time. The Legend of Korra had demonstrated that children's animation could handle political complexity, but Steven Universe was doing something specific that the others were not, or at least not in the same way. It was dealing explicitly with queerness. Not coded queerness, not subtext that parents might miss, but actual, direct, this is who these characters are and how they love queerness. Garnet is a same-sex relationship made visible. Ruby and Sapphire are not metaphorical. They are literal 2 characters who love each other and whose love creates something new. Their wedding in Season 5 was the first same-sex wedding in children's animated programming on Cartoon Network, and the show treated it as exactly what it was. 2 people who love each other, deciding to mark that love publicly, surrounded by the people who care about them, with Steven crying immediately and the music being wonderful. Pearl's love for Rose is not subtext. It is stated and explored and allowed to be complicated, allowed to be, simultaneously, one of the most beautiful things in the show and one of the most painful, because Rose did not love Pearl back in quite the way Pearl needed, and Pearl has had to learn to live with that for 5,000 years. The show does not simplify this. It does not resolve it into either pure tragedy or pure healing. It holds the complexity and lets it exist. The show also dealt with trauma, which is something children's animation has not always been willing to do with the specificity it deserves. Steven Universe Future, in particular, was frank in a way that is almost startling about what happens when a child is placed repeatedly in life-threatening situations and expected to process those situations by moving forward rather than sitting with them. Dr. Maheswaran, using real medical language, describes what is happening to Steven as adverse childhood experiences. She does not say PTSD, but she describes exactly what PTSD does to a body, the way the nervous system loses the ability to distinguish between ordinary stress and genuine threat, the way every small difficulty becomes proof of catastrophe, the way a person who has been required to be strong for too long eventually cannot be strong for one more thing. Children who watch this show learn something about themselves through it. Children who recognized, in Stephen's willingness to cry, something they had been told was weakness. Children who recognized, in the Crystal Gems' flawed but persistent love for each other, something that looked like the chosen family they were building in their own lives. Children who recognized, in the careful way the show handled Rose's complicated legacy, that the people who love us can also hurt us, and that this does not cancel either the love or the harm. Rebecca Sugar said in interviews that Steven Universe was always, at some level, about her own experience about queerness, about being made to feel too large or too much in a world that wanted less of you, about the specific experience of growing up with a family that loves you and a culture that is uncertain what to do with you. She put this into the show without letting it become a personal essay. She transmuted it into a universe with kindergartens and diamond rulers and a pink boy on a beach who was too good for his own good, and she trusted that the specificity of the experience would reach the people who needed it. It did. The evidence is in the fandom, which is one of the most dedicated and emotionally invested communities to have formed around any children's show in recent memory. The people who loved Steven Universe loved it in the way you love the first thing that made you feel seen. The first thing that told you the story of a person whose existence was complicated and valuable and real. There is a thing Rose Quartz said to a camera in an ancient forest. The camera was being operated by Pearl, and Rose did not know quite how it worked, and she kept saying, "Is it on to Pearl?" before she got it sorted out. She was practicing, making a message for a person she had never met and never would meet. Trying to figure out what to say to someone she had already decided she loved. She did not get it perfectly right. She could not have. She said, "I am made of the choices I made," and left it at that, which is true and also leaves out the specific choices and what they cost and who paid for them. She said she was sorry without listing what for. She told Steven that she had given up being a person so that he could be his own, which is the most loving and the most incomplete thing you can tell someone who is going to need to understand a great deal more than that to navigate the life they have been given. Is it on? Yes. It was always on. The show is built around inheritance, not just the legal kind, not just the genetic kind, but the accumulated kind. What the people before us did, what they could not put down before they left. What we find when we start looking through the things they left behind, and how we decide what to do with it. Pearl's grief, Garnet's certainty, Amethyst's humor over the wound it is covering, Lapis's careful steps back towards something like trust, Jasper in the last frame, healed, watching the world change around her without a map, and Steven, in a van, driving away from the town that shaped him, carrying his mother's gem and his father's music, and the understanding that being loved does not require being perfectly fine, that it is possible to need help and deserve it, that the question, "Who am I?" exactly is one that gets answered over time and in motion, not by standing still and waiting for the answer to arrive. The Crystal Temple is still there on the coast of Beach City. The gems are still in it, doing what they do, Pearl teaching at Little Homeschool, Garnet being Garnet, Amethyst eating things she should not eat, and being warmly chaotic about it. Bismuth is at her forge, building things for a world that is not the same world she built things for before. Lion is on the steps of the temple, probably, pink and enormous, aging very slowly, keeping his secrets in his mane, in the pocket dimension where a tree grows in permanent afternoon light under a sky that never fully becomes night. The cluster is in the Earth's core, in its bubble, at peace. Spinel is on Homeworld with the diamonds, who fell in love with her immediately, who are genuinely glad she exists. She went there freely, she chose it. And White Diamond, on some planet somewhere, is letting other gems enter her body and find themselves there, in a reversal of everything she used to be. The show made something that continues past its own edges. A world built large enough that the off-screen parts feel inhabited. The sense that the frame is only one window into a place that exists in all the other directions too. The characters have futures the show will not be showing us. The questions have weight even without answers. The lore is alive in the way that good lore is always alive, not as a collection of facts to be cataloged, but as a set of truths that keep generating new implications the longer you sit with them. This is what Rebecca Sugar built. Not just a show, a world that remembers. A story that understands that the most important things are often the things that do not get said, because the person who should have said them ran out of time or nerve or simply did not have the words. A beach, a temple, a boy who carries his mother's gemstone and is learning slowly, painfully, with the help of people who love him, to be exactly and completely himself. The show is still there whenever you want to go back to it. Beach City is always on the coast somewhere. The crystal temple lit against the sky. The sound of the ocean, constant and reliable. Lion on the steps, pink and enormous, watching the water. Sleep well. The lore will keep. It always does. If you made it this far, thank you. Genuinely. This is the kind of video that requires a specific kind of patience, and you brought it. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. There is a lot more of this kind of deep, slow lore exploration coming. And if you are somewhere between asleep and awake right now, floating in that soft, uncertain space where Steven Universe tends to put you, that is exactly where this was meant to land you. Good night.